Patricia stared at the email on her computer screen for several seconds before reading it again. She had worked for the company for 12 years. She had arrived early, stayed late, trained new employees, solved impossible client problems, and quietly carried entire projects when others walked away. Her performance reviews were always exceptional. Every quarter, she exceeded her goals. Everyone in the office believed she was finally going to become the new department manager. Then the message appeared. Please report to the executive office at 3 p.m. She smiled to herself. This was it. The promotion she had earned. At exactly 3 o'clock, Patricia walked into the luxurious office of Richard Collins, the company's millionaire CEO. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. Expensive artwork decorated the walls. Richard leaned back in his leather chair, wearing the confident smile everyone in the company recognized. "Congratulations, Patricia," he said with a smirk. "We're promoting Susan." For a moment, Patricia thought she had misunderstood. "I'm sorry. Susan will be your new manager." Richard folded his hands together as if he had just delivered wonderful news. Patricia blinked. "Susan has only been here 8 months. Richard shrugged. "She's energetic. I trained Susan." "Exactly. You did a great job. I've led every major project this year. And we appreciate that. I've increased department revenue by 30%. Richard smiled again. "You're invaluable where you are." Those 5 words hit harder than any insult. You're invaluable where you are. In other words, Patricia was too useful to promote. She took a slow breath. "So excellence is my punishment?" Richard's smile faded slightly. "Don't be emotional. I'm asking a business question. We need stability." "You mean you need someone willing to keep doing management work without management pay?" Silence filled the room. Richard finally stood. "The decision has been made." Patricia nodded. "I understand." She calmly walked back to her desk while everyone watched, expecting tears or frustration. Instead, she quietly opened a blank document. Not a resignation letter. A checklist. She listed every responsibility she handled that wasn't part of her actual job description. Client negotiations. Budget planning. Training. Scheduling. Quality control. Vendor management. Emergency problem solving. Internal reporting. Software implementation. Half the company's daily operations depended on her. She printed the list. Then she removed every task that wasn't included in her employment contract. The next morning, Patricia arrived at exactly 9 o'clock. Not 7:15 like always. At 5 p.m., she packed her bag. Susan looked confused. "You're leaving?" "My shift ended." "But the quarterly report." "Management handles management responsibilities." Susan laughed nervously. "You're joking." Patricia smiled politely. "No." Within 3 days, small problems began appearing. Reports were late. Clients waited longer. Invoices contained mistakes. Suppliers complained. Meetings became disorganized. Richard assumed Susan simply needed time. By the second week, everything was worse. One of the company's largest clients requested an emergency meeting after receiving incorrect information. Susan panicked. She called Patricia. "I need your help. I'm currently working on my assigned responsibilities. You know how to fix this. I'm sure you'll figure it out. But you're the only one who understands the system." Patricia smiled kindly. "That's exactly what I tried explaining during my promotion meeting." Susan hung up. Richard wasn't smiling anymore. His executive meetings became longer. Investors began asking uncomfortable questions. Customer satisfaction dropped. Overtime costs doubled because multiple employees were trying to replace one woman. They couldn't. Not because Patricia was magical. Because she had spent 12 years building systems nobody else bothered to learn. One Friday afternoon, Richard appeared beside Patricia's desk. "Can we talk?" She followed him into a conference room. He closed the door. "We need your leadership." Patricia remained calm. "My current position doesn't include leadership responsibilities. We'll adjust things." "Like my salary?" Richard hesitated. "We'll discuss compensation." "You had 12 years to discuss compensation." He sighed. "Let's move forward." Patricia nodded. "I already have." Richard looked confused. She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was her resignation. His face changed immediately. "You can't be serious." "I've accepted another position." "Where?" "A competitor." Richard's expression froze. "They offered me director level." His voice became quieter. "Director?" "Yes." "They're paying you that much?" "They're paying me what my experience is worth." Richard stared at the paper. "When do you leave?" 2 weeks. He leaned back, suddenly realizing the situation. "Name your price." Patricia smiled. "You already did." "No, seriously. You had your chance. We'll double your salary." She shook her head. "It's not about the money anymore." "What is it about?" "Respect." Richard had no answer. During Patricia's final 2 weeks, something unexpected happened. Employees from every department stopped by her desk. Some brought flowers. Others wrote thank you cards. One young employee cried, "You believed in me when nobody else did." Another said, "Everything I know, you taught me." The maintenance supervisor hugged her. "The place won't be the same." Even Susan visited. She looked exhausted. "I owe you an apology." Patricia smiled warmly. "You don't owe me anything. I accepted something I hadn't earned. That's not your fault. I should have spoken up." Patricia placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Now you know what real leadership looks like." Susan nodded through tears. "I'm resigning too." Patricia looked surprised. "Why?" "They didn't want a manager. They wanted someone they could blame." For the first time, Patricia truly felt sorry for her. 3 months later, Patricia walked through the modern headquarters of her new company. The atmosphere felt different. Employees collaborated. Managers listened. Ideas mattered more than titles. On her first day as Director of Operations, the CEO personally welcomed her. "We've heard remarkable things about you." Patricia smiled. "I hope they're true." They are. Unlike her previous employer, this CEO had done his homework. He had spoken with former clients, former co-workers, industry partners. Everyone described Patricia the same way. Dependable. Honest. Brilliant. A leader. 6 months later, Patricia's new company achieved record profits. Employee turnover dropped dramatically. Customer satisfaction reached its highest level in company history. The CEO congratulated her during a company-wide meeting. "You proved that leadership isn't about having authority. It's about earning trust." The entire room stood and applauded. Meanwhile, Richard Collins faced very different meetings. After Patricia left, 2 more senior employees resigned. Then another. Then 5 more. The company's reputation quietly declined. Clients followed experienced employees to competitors. Recruiting became difficult. Reviews on employment websites described a culture where loyalty wasn't rewarded. Profits continued falling. One afternoon, Richard attended an industry conference. Across the room, he noticed Patricia speaking on stage. Hundreds of business leaders listened carefully as she explained how organizations retain talented employees. One sentence captured everyone's attention. The most expensive employee isn't the highest paid one. It's the one you underestimate until they're gone. The audience applauded. Richard quietly slipped out before the presentation ended. Months later, Patricia received an unexpected email. It was from Susan. "I wanted you to know I found a company that values people. Your example gave me the courage to stop settling. Thank you." Patricia smiled before replying. "I'm happy for you. Never let anyone convince you that your worth depends on their opinion." She pressed send. Looking out her office window, she reflected on everything that had happened. She realized something important. Many people stay in places where they're appreciated just enough to keep working, but never enough to keep growing. They mistake familiarity for opportunity. They confuse loyalty with obligation. But loyalty should never require accepting disrespect. Hard work matters. Experience matters. Integrity matters. Yet none of those qualities mean anything inside an organization that refuses to recognize them. Sometimes the greatest promotion isn't the title you hope to receive. It's finding the courage to leave the place that never intended to give it to you. Patricia didn't become successful because one company finally noticed her value. She became successful because she stopped asking people to recognize it and chose to recognize it herself. Her story spread throughout the business community, inspiring professionals everywhere to advocate for themselves, continue learning, and refuse to settle for empty promises. Managers began rethinking how they treated dedicated employees. Companies started investing more seriously in internal talent rather than overlooking those who quietly kept everything running. Years later, Patricia was invited back to speak at a leadership summit. She ended her presentation with words that every person in the audience wrote down. Never let someone convince you that being indispensable means staying invisible. If your work creates value, your voice deserves to be heard. And if a door remains closed no matter how hard you've knocked, don't waste your life standing outside. Build the courage to walk toward a door that's already waiting to open. The room rose in a standing ovation. Not because Patricia had become a successful executive, but because she reminded everyone of a simple truth: confidence isn't arrogance, loyalty isn't silence, and the greatest investment you'll ever make is believing that your hard work deserves respect. Sometimes the best revenge is not proving someone wrong. It's building a life so fulfilling that their opinion no longer matters. And that is exactly what Patricia did.